Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the Gluten-Free Psychiatry Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Williams. Today's episode is Safe Medical Cannabis. There are a lot of conflicting war on cannabis information that's been put out there for so long. I'm trying to clear the air, so to speak, and hopefully shed some light on different toxins that have worked their way in to the cannabis food chain and where the benefits are starting to be overrun with side effects. So what we're looking at is a 6,000 year history of cannabis being used for medicinal purposes. And back then they didn't have all the pesticides that have worked their way in, lead getting into the brain of users or anything weird like that. So there was once upon a time an opportunity to get the safe off gases, the chemical compounds, the terpenes and endocannabinoids, inhaled or consumed somehow. But nowadays, it's toxic to get marijuana from almost everywhere. Okay? It is toxic to get marijuana from almost everywhere. Let me explain what I mean. Look at this. 95% of legal cannabis users getting cannabis in the United States from dispensaries the right way have elevated levels of lead in their blood and cadmium. Take a look at these references. Early on, the same chemical, diacetyl, from vaping cartridges was showing up in vape pens for marijuana. And it's the same chemical that was in popcorn manufacturing. When they first made the early versions of microwavable popcorn, it gave off diacetyl, and lots of people were killed and injured with popcorn lung. And the same thing comes off in a small amount in vape pens. So you have to be careful for that. Even though it's specifically banned, there's high levels that can come off of the metal itself, is what I understand. And also, when you burn material, any kind of paper, wood, even leaf material, plant material itself, the carbon and some of the actual material itself is harmful. And in the case of cannabis, there's been no studies really outlining and controlling the difference of can you safely get cannabis into someone's body. Because I have a feeling that lots of the people's side effects to marijuana has got to do with a lot of these reasons right here. Okay, so I think a lot more people could use marijuana if it was safe. That's the reason that I'm doing this podcast. And I can't prescribe it as a physician. I can tell you my story. And when I was medical director in 2 states, both Colorado and Missouri, where it was legal, both recreational and even to grow it at home, plus they have medical cards where you can volunteer to give up your right to buy guns anytime you want to in legal states. On the show notes, I've got links where you can get medical cards. It comes as a recommendation. It's not a prescription, because it's still a Schedule I DEA drug like cocaine. And I have seen legal cocaine before. I saw it in a little vial, just like a vaccine vial or a testosterone vial, in an emergency room in a case of a severe nosebleed, real deep, where you have to inject it to save them from bleeding out from their face. It can happen in trauma and some unlucky people with combinations of trauma and anatomy. When I did emergency medicine, I saw legal cocaine once. That's it. But it has to be signed in and out and wasted in front of witnesses and stuff like that with a controlled Pyxis and all that login stuff. It's a pain to deal with. Hard to get your hands on for research. When I worked at the VA, they were researching cannabis among veterans. There was one doctor, I think, in California, that fought the VA for the right to study cannabis in veterans and sent out an email that went VA-wide to everybody, I understand, that gave a temporary update, like a progress report on how that study was going, and it gave a few interesting finds. One of them was it was helping, and they were giving the equivalent of 3 joints per day. And many of the veterans thought that was too much. And they thought that the cannabis they were getting from the government was weak, and it was also full of seeds and stems and stuff like that. It wasn't good pot. So that was the preliminary study within the VA on veterans and cannabis. And as a psychiatrist that worked at the VA for 4 years, I must have heard at least a few dozen veterans tell me that marijuana saved their lives, and I started listening after a while. You want the pleasant off gases. There's hundreds of compounds in there, more than 200 different terpenes that gives marijuana its distinct flavor and smell that you can smell a mile away. Myrcene is present in eucalyptus, thyme, and hops made for beer. And so it's pleasant for different reasons, gives it a musky smell. Linalool will bring you down, and pinene will bring you up. Beta-caryophyllene is found in black pepper, and it gives it a smoky or peppery type of aroma. Limonene is probably my favorite for creative. It says energetic boost, but it's super creative. So is pinene, the uplifting ones. And that's rare, so I want to give a shout out. I don't have any affiliation with the Green Light Dispensary in Springfield, Missouri, because they have the most sativa options of different strains than anyone in Missouri. It's hard to find a place with that many options in Colorado too, but they do a better job. I'll get to that later. All right. So that's the pleasant off gases you're getting. But if you smoke a joint, the pleasant off gases, if you take a look at this picture of this gentleman smoking, this area highlighted in green is where the heat from the end of the joint is already warming up the marijuana that's in the rest of the stick. Okay? And that's actually where the pleasant off gases are coming from. The burn material itself is toxic. And so I've got this slide labeled mixed off gases when smoked. You got both the good and the bad when you're doing burning. So if you'll switch to edibles or blend with edibles, you're going to reduce the amount of that. Say you prefer to smoke, but edibles are okay. If I could convince you, because you're doing it anyway, to convert to edibles 50%, then you'd have 50% edibles and you'd have 50% smoked. And if you look at this, say, as roughly 50-50, half of this aroma and smoke is good, half of it's toxic because of the fire itself. So you would go from 50% toxic to 25 by cutting your edibles. So, some tricks like that might help you. Be aware of that sort of thing. If you're coughing a lot with a certain device you're using, be aware that that material itself is toxic. So stay tuned here. We've got more options and pictures to show you how to mitigate that to some degree. So here's the paper that discusses popcorn lung and the diacetyl. It's mostly a flavor compound that is in butter for fake buttery flavor on popcorn. That's what basically killed people when they microwave it and heat it up. It become toxic. And I want to make this the first slide in a series I'm going to collect and put in my documentary, the next documentary, that AI is lying to you. Here's a good example. I tend to use the Brave browser on this computer and DuckDuckGo on a different one. But I asked, does diacetyl come from vapes? And I'm curious about all types of vape pens, marijuana, and nicotine. And AI says no. And right on the same page, the very first organic search result says yes. So this is happening all over the place in lots of industries. And I've studied several different industries. And so this is going to be the first in a collection. Stay tuned for more of that. Primary solutions. What can we do about it? What's the safest way to consume it? That's the point of this podcast. Totally organic. Let's start there. First, this is very difficult to find. There is such thing as a clean green certification. I've got a link to that. But Maggie's Farm is the only one in Colorado that is organic. I couldn't find one organic completely in Missouri at all. There are some that are real close, like Carroll, I think it's Carroll or Carrollton County Cannabis Company, CCC. There's 4 C's in their name, so I think they're called C4. If you look up C4 in Missouri, they are good. It's the best you can find, but they're not organic for 13 years like Maggie's Farm is now. It's 2025. They say 13 years on their website. So the show notes here are shareable to anyone that you know is smoking cannabis anyway. Please don't get illegal cannabis. Cartels have illegally been using toxic chemicals at national forests and places all over. And so if you're buying marijuana illegally, you could be smoking things that could cause cancer, could be spread to children, could concentrate in the fetus, but will probably come out in an ionic foot bath. So go back and take a look at episode 3 in the Gluten Free Psychiatry podcast. If you've been consuming stuff from the store, even legal cannabis from dispensaries, remember they have lead in them, and lead has been shown by others to come out in an ionic foot bath. I haven't repeated that. I don't have elevated lead. But if anyone has lead or any of these other chemicals, if you're trying to detox, that's a separate topic, but it's related to cannabis. If you have both elevated lead in your blood, if you have ADHD since smoking marijuana, and you think it's more than just a little forgetfulness from marijuana itself, you could be getting toxins in your brain. That'd be a great reason to start a mastermind group here at mindshiftcare.com. That's how the groups work. We can troubleshoot it together. We can share our brain power together and help you get it out of your body and measure it in the blood and trend it coming down, like I'm doing on the Gluten Free Psychiatry podcast. So I'm showing here in Ventura County, the sheriff's office found that just September of 2025, this is 2 months ago, they found another location. Back to 2019, illegal pot operations in public forests are poisoning wildlife and water. So this is making it more contaminated when you go swim at a lake, eat any of the food, and the birds and other animals eat grass, they eat each other. There's a food pyramid, and then we're just eating this stuff, and it's just increasing the amount of toxins in our food, and we are aggregators as apex predators, and so that means we're getting higher and higher concentrations of poison, and you really should think about getting your blood checked for some of these things. Especially my detox protocol would involve at least track forever chemicals, PFAS. You can get that tested on your own at Quest or any lab test now, and make some changes in your life, and then retest the blood 6 months later. Just as long as it's trending down, don't worry about it. That's my advice. But in some homes, depending on somebody's job, what happened in our home is one person can be trending down with their blood, the other person can be going up in the same home with the same behaviors based on exposures at work. So don't trust anything. Don't trust your employer. Don't trust water fountains. Don't trust plastic water bottles. And don't trust your marijuana unless you grow it yourself or get it from Maggie's Farm. That's it. That is my podcast. But let me keep going. I've got more points to make here. All right, let's see. Where were we? Oh, so Maggie's Farm has a few locations only. That's it. I wish when I lived in Missouri, I had just really got the attention of the manager of my dispensaries and pushed to get them to order Maggie's Farm products to be sold at those dispensaries, because I would have gotten them exclusively. Okay? That's a strong recommendation. I don't have any affiliation with them. I did reach out for a podcast. So here's how we can mind shift this topic together. If you live in a legal state, what you can do is send me your questions. What would you want me to ask the Maggie's Farm representatives or the founders, CEO, on a podcast here? And if I can show a demand from the listeners, I'll email them the questions and say, look, we have an active audience that cares about this, wants to spread it to their communities, and wants to know how to get their dispensaries to carry your product. Would you come on the show and let's hear from you? And maybe we can cut deals and stuff and get other companies to pay attention to that, because we're voting with our dollars all the time and we're frying our brains with lead from these pesticides, folks. Go to Maggie's Farms. See if you can get that spread, even just the message of it, because people aren't reading the headlines. Stoners don't read headlines. Or people that use it for medicine or have traveled, been medical refugees to a state where they can get access to it, they need it desperately. That group of people, they're too sick to read all the headlines. They're not tracking all that stuff very often, right? I wouldn't think so, on average. There's always exceptions. I've made exceptions. I'm an exception maker, and that's why I want to mind shift this industry and spread more organic and awareness. It's a huge piece of advocacy. So here's a photo of a water bong with ice. And this water bong has ice in the tubes. And so as you inhale from the top, the air goes down into the ball of water on the bottom, and the water itself catches things like ash and a few debris, the debris that might go down from the plant material itself. And then the cold tube itself tends to grab and form a barrier. It makes the wall kind of sticky so that any material would grab a hold and stay there. It's wet and cold. And it's the temperature itself keeps it cold going in the lungs, and the lungs find that a lot more acceptable, so people can get bigger hits of smoke with cold temperatures. Because remember the off-gassing temperature from that page, I don't think I focused on that, but here where we have all the terpenes, myrcene, it comes off at a temperature of 166 Celsius, which is roughly 330 degrees. But if you drop down here and look at beta-caryophyllene, that's 246. Pinene is 312. And so at cooler temperatures, you're going to get better flavor. So there's digital ones too that just vaporize, these pins. Here's a collection of them, and if you want to read an article on it, just click on the link in the show notes. It'll take you right to the article that discusses this. But all these things do is you put the dry bud in there, and they just gently heat up, and they have heat settings, so you could have it on low first and get real low heat off of it and get different terpenes. And then once you're not getting that anymore, you bump the heat setting up once again. You don't have to replace the cartridge. You just go through a couple puffs at each heat setting, getting the different terpenes off of it in a graduated fashion. And then you'll empty them all out, and there won't be any more there, and you can just kind of tell, and you're done. And then at that point, empty it. So it's a way to milk it and make your stuff last a lot better than smoking a joint, which burns 2 to 5 times as much, as it's made for sharing. Item number 3 on primary solutions is none to minimal butane exposure from lighters. So just be aware that as you're using a lighter, you are also inhaling carbon waste product from combustion from a man-made device into your lungs. And that's a separate line of insult to your body. It's not designed to do that. If you can use such a system like one of those lighters that flames and pushes out a directed force, you could light your cannabis before you put it to your mouth. That's one way to think about it if you're super cautious. They say that rosin is the cleanest way. If you can find a company that doesn't add any chemicals to the way they get the material out, and in general, with all of your essential oils, I'm published on an anti-essential oil article because a toxic version of lavender fried this girl's brain with brain lesions and made her completely psychotic. Very bad. I'll tell that story later in a private group. But it is a published case report out there, and you can look on my CV page for the pictures of her brain from toxic essential oil. And all these terpenes are just essential oils from the plant. That's all they are. And it's the toxins that burn the brain up, not the plant oils. Plants are safe. People are not. So there's also paste in concentrate that is possible to get without any chemical processing. But if we, the people, don't vote with our dollars and pressure and ask these companies to come up with organic versions, come up with clean extraction methods, become clean green certified like Maggie Farms is, then they're just going to keep doing it. They're making way too much money off of it. The reason is because they have to spend a lot of money on chemicals, but that saves them money in the long run because it sort of guarantees that the batch won't get ruined, more or less. But I know our technology and availability is possible. I mean, Maggie Farm's been doing it for 13 years, and I understand they grow outside with no pesticides. The only thing hitting there is the toxin they dump out of the airplanes above, like heavy metals and plastics and aluminum and strontium, things like that, which all of that would absorb into the plants. And cannabis is supposed to be a super absorber of heavy metals, which makes me think we should be growing in a cover, like a greenhouse. However, in a Texas heat, not the plastic covers, because that's going to off-gas the plastic from the cover of the roof itself. If you had some kind of glass or a real roof and solid glass strong walls that made your greenhouse, that might be the safe way to prevent off-gassing within your own greenhouse and prevent what the airplanes are dropping from these chemicals from touching it. All right, so we've seen a picture of the water bottle earlier. The next one is the freeze pipe. This stays frozen in your freezer, keeping it cool on the lungs. It has a spiral pattern that causes the debris to stick to the sides a little bit. And it's kind of helpful to have two because they thaw real fast when you're breathing hot smoke through them. But it feels great on the lungs for about 2 to 4 puffs. And you can rinse it with water a few times before you have to really clean it. I have one and I've cleaned it with Thieves solution, the concentrate I get from Young Living. Thieves is a plant and it's just mixed with water. So it's a non-toxic cleaning solution you could spray in your mouth if you wanted to, like the rest of Young Living's products in general. Watch out for my comment on hot oils in the episode on homeopathic remedies for pain. In other words, Freeze Pipe recommends toxic cleaning chemicals, and they'll sell them to you. But you don't need that stuff. You can just soak it in Thieves and then rinse it with hot water, flush it with cold water, blow out all of the water that's in the tube, dry it off with a towel, put it back in the freezer, upside down. That's what I've done. Cigarettes and joints do act as their own filters pretty well until they're more than halfway smoked. And then you're getting a lot of debris and ash and that sort of thing. They do make cigarette joints like cones and stuff where you can insert, or they come with about a 1-inch rolled up cardboard filter on the tip. That does physically stop some of the physical debris from entering. You don't want particulate debris from anything in your lungs. You just don't. Anyway, I hope this helps you think twice and think safe about medical cannabis and use it in high regards. This has been the Gluten-Free Psychiatry Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Williams, online at mindshiftcare.com.